Good morning. The Committee of the Whole is called to order, but we will continue on recess until we reach a quorum. All right? So we'll continue on recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Reminder, we are still on the first round. We'll have 2 rounds for discussion on Chapter 1 relative to the adoption of revenues. With panelists, we will have 2 rounds of questions for the panelists. For the panel, with each senator allotted 10 minutes for questions, not including response. Please be reminded that if you yield your time, only one person can yield their time to any of our colleagues here. Once that is yielded, all that time is gone and is given to the person that allowed to speak. Then after completion of the 2 rounds with panelists, they will be excused, and then we will move to the, we'll begin with the 3rd round, which will continue on with the budget bill. We will now begin with, we'll continue off with, we'll continue off now with Senator Amanda, and she should be here shortly. Senator, Madam Vice? She's just walking down, and then,
Okay, then you can
well,
go
we
back.
have to complete it for, my
I
colleagues,
already
be
know.
reminded, if you're not here when we get to you and we pass you, your time is up. We will just continue moving. Okay, that's the key, here is to be here and be available to make the discussion. Because time is sensitive. But we'll give it about a minute. She should be walking down the stairs, and then we can, if she has any questions, she can ask the questions, and then we'll move to Vice Speaker for her questions.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, is BBMR planning on attending?
Who?
BBMR?
Yes, he's just coming from a funeral right now. He's on his way down, but DOA's here and DRT's here, and they're prepared to answer whatever question. But yes, Mr. Carlson is still on his way. All right? And speaking of the gentleman from BBMR, he is here, Mr. Carlson. I've been advised that Senator Shelton didn't have any questions for this round, so we'll move now to Vice Speaker. Munya, do you have any questions for the panel?
Just a comment, Manana Sizulis, Mr. Chair, and to the panel members here, good morning. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions for the first round because I'm hoping that we can get through this adoption sooner than later. But I'd like to thank the Office of Finance and Budgeting for their presentation and on this budget and allocation overview. I just want to say, as I was listening to the presentation yesterday, the closeness and the projections levels on both the executive request and the OFB levels, there were a lot of same projections, and I want to say that I'm hoping that this budget session will probably go smoother than later, and the 20 years that I've been a part of this legislature, this is, I think, the first time that I've seen the numbers come really close. The variations is very small. So I just want to take the time to thank both the Office of Finance and Budgeting and, of course, the administration for the receptiveness of being here and working for this, as this, the government of Guam's mission mandate is to be able to provide for the basic services of health, education, and safety, and making sure that this budget is good for our island. So thank you very much. I do have questions on the second and third round as it relates to my oversight agencies, but I will wait my turn. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Sana Masi.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. Senator Joanne Brown, do you have any questions, ma'am, for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly good morning to all of you. I wanted to ask the Finance Office, because it was relayed yesterday that there are about 11 agencies that are going to see a decrease in their budget appropriation this year. even though we're looking at, again, if my figures are inaccurate, you can enlighten me, about a $90 million additional increase in the overall budget projections for this year. And then we're looking at what? You're looking at asking for another $17 million of authorization. Can you let us know, I'd like to know with these 11 agencies, what amounts are being cut from their budgets, each of these agencies? How much are they being deducted?
Yes, Senator, if I can just let you know of the 11 departments I mentioned yesterday, all of them, where the major cuts were in the special funds. And if you notice, the special funds is where we're having problems tracking. So we had to go back there and make the appropriate adjustments, bring those revenue levels down to a point where we feel is reasonable and attainable to collect in those funds, and we appropriate it from there accordingly. Some of these agencies, I believe, I think, did these guys with general fund? Some of them got general fund? Maybe these two, right? Yeah. Yeah, there's 3 of them on the list that actually got a decrease also in the general fund, but that totaled only 119,000 as compared to the reduction in the special funds, which is almost at 5 million.
And what do you attribute the reduction in the special funds to?
One is because of the tracking. These special funds are not tracking what we estimated they would when we did the projections last year, and getting an updated and based on the current tracking level we see in the funds, they're not performing up to par.
And wouldn't you say that these special funds, I mean, they're generated from local activity? I mean, if it's EP and permits, DPW and permits, whatever the case may be that these revenues are coming from, I mean, that's all local, isn't it?
It could have an effect on these collections, yes. I mean, I won't stand here and tell you no, or sit here and tell you no, but there is maybe a domino effect on some of these special funds as a result of the economy. But I think the impact, I think especially for these special funds, remember these special funds are specific. They charge specific fees for specific services. So if those services are being affected by the economy, then of course, yes, they would have an effect on it.
Don't you think that should give us an underlying indicator then that if these funds are generated locally with regards to local activity, wouldn't that be give you a moment of pause if we're seeing a decrease in those revenues coming in on these special funds?
Yes, Senator, and that's why we made those adjustments in the special funds projection. But on the general fund side, I do believe that it can hold its own.
Well, and I don't look at it just in terms of adjusting the revenue to accommodate what is an anticipated decrease, but to me, it kind of gives me an indicator, because these are generated at a local level, that there's a decrease in activity. However, whatever, if it's obtaining permits and paying fees for that, then there obviously has to be a decrease in overall activity in these special funds, which is a concern, because if we're looking, at one end, I see a projection that everything's all well and the money's flowing and we should all just go have a party, and at the other end, something as basic as funds that are generated in department and agencies for services that are being provided, to see such a significant decrease at this point, I think is, certainly does give me a moment of pause. With regards to any other department or agency in the government of Guam, what other, again, I understand this is being proposed by the committee, what other cuts are being made to any other department or agency in the government of Guam? Because you're specifying that these 11 agencies listed, BBMR, DPW, land management, I mean, the list goes on here, are in relation to the fees that they otherwise would be collecting. What is the committee proposing for other cuts to government agencies in the budget? You mentioned you were taking out for positions that may not have been filled for several years, or whatever the case may be, but what other cuts are being proposed?
If you're referring to when we talk about cuts, we're talking about cuts to the FY22 level. So what we did is we went back and reassessed the expenditure trends for all the departments and agencies, including programs that were funded by all local funds, and we kind of looked at the expenditure trend and see if they were expending up to at least the level that would meet the appropriation. Those agencies we kind of left status quo. If there's these agencies that we listed here are some of those agencies that were like tracking, their expenditures were tracking below the appropriation level. We took into consideration the remaining 3 months left in the fiscal year, allocated for those average expenditures we felt based on their tracking, their 9 months, and we appropriated. We left we left those funds there, but whatever difference there was between that and the FY22 authorized level is what we took out. That's where we made the cuts, and that's how we came up with the cuts.
Okay, I understand you're explaining the rationale. What departments or agencies have been cut and by how much that are being proposed by the committee?
Okay, these are the 11 agencies. These are the ones I mentioned yesterday. We start out with BBMR. They received a total net reduction of $68,000.
Special.
Public Works, $101,000. Department of Land Management, $40,000. Professional engineer and architect, they received a $6,000. I'm just rounding it off to about $6,000 cut. Guam Regional Transit received a reduction of about $121,000. DPR, they received a $390,000 cut. EPA, on Guam Regional Transit, it's $121,000.
Right.
On DPR, it's EPA, it's $390,000.
Okay, EPA.
Parks and Recreation, it's $103. Department of Chamorro Affairs, $52,000. Mayor's Council of Guam is $3.8 million. 2.8 million. Chamorro Land Trust is $137,000. And Guam Solid Waste at $215,000.
Can you elaborate, because that's quite a high figure for the Mayor's Council, what attributed to this 2.8 million?
In FY22, their appropriation level was appropriated out of the Guam Highway Fund. We advised them last year when we were putting the budget together is that our intent is to right-size all these special funds and fund only those agencies that the funds were created for. So over the years, initially, and this was before my predecessor, used some of these special funds to fund agencies that normally would not have been funded out of these special funds. Over the years, over the last 3 years, I have slowly begun to wean these departments off to try to get them back to the fund source they're supposed to be funded, most of them which is the general fund, and those that have been funded in the past by these special funds, wean them off slowly, and then put these and only fund those agencies that these funds are supposed to provide for. Now, in the case of the mayors, they had an appropriation of $2.8 million for the last couple of years out of the Guam Highway Fund. Mm-hmm. So I advised them, and even the chairman of appropriation, we sat with the Mayor's Council, and we sat with DPW and told them about the situation, and we asked them that, could you please, we were actually going to implement it last year to wean them off, but the time period was so short, they asked for another year extension. So we said, okay, granted, we'll give you a year to notify all these employees. I believe there's about a total of 100 of them, community service workers, to inform them this is what's happening. They're not losing their job, it's just that just the funding source for these positions are being shifted. So this year, we hope that, we also had communication with the governor, and the governor has made the commitment that she would go ahead and fund these positions.
So how are they going to be funded? How do you make up the difference of this 2.8 million to the Mayor's Council or to the individual village mayors?
Again, in our previous conversation with the governor has assured us that she would step in and actually cover these positions for FY23. If you look in the administrative provision, I think the administrative or miscellaneous appropriation section of the bill, there is a section there that we wrote language that would authorize the governor to pay up to $2.8 million to cover the salary of 100 community service workers in the Mayor's Council.
So you're telling us that, I understand, of course, right-sizing the proper positions with regards to the funding, especially if it is from the highway fund, because I'm sure all our people will agree our highways definitely need a lot more improvement and maintenance, but we have 100-plus community service workers that we're assuming the governor is going to transfer money to fund them this upcoming fiscal year.
Yes.
And the mayors are okay with that? I mean, I may or may not have my employees funded. Why aren't we directly addressing an appropriation for existing warm bodies in these positions then?
Again, Senator, it's because of our communication with the governor, the assurance from the governor, our agreement with the mayor's council, and they're totally on board with this, and they have no problem with it. We felt that, you know, if the governor can commit to this, and we've also actually have legislation in the bill to that effect, we thought that was sufficient enough to address the concern.
And that's how we're going about funding the budget for this upcoming fiscal year. We're relying on the governor's goodwill to fund these positions. Again, I mean, the responsibility to appropriate, even though it seems kind of weird the past few years here, is actually responsibility of the legislature. I find it odd that we're not addressing directly funding these positions if that's the intention to fund these positions. Is there anywhere else in the proposed budget by the committee where this strange setup is in place? Are we any other positions in the government of Guam that we're relying on the governor's transfer authority to fund any other bodies in the government?
No, Senator, this is the only section in the budget that addresses this type of situation. No other department.
So then the poor mayors are at the mercy of the governor to fund these positions, because I have to tell you, I've so recently heard from mayors that have been complaining that they've had services provided and they've had their vendors complaining to them about non-payment as recently as last week. So I hope it's all good, but that's not what I hear individually.
Well, you know, I would like to think that, you know, when especially in the way I work, is that when somebody tells me something, I will take it verbatim. I've went to the extent of even putting language in the budget bill to assure that that conversation, that agreement would hold true. Now, I think I've done my part adequately to make sure that these positions are funded to a certain extent. Now, if the governor chooses to do otherwise, other than what she has agreed regarding this, regarding these particular positions, now that's a little bit out of my control. But yes, Senator, I agree with you. But you know, to some extent, like I do the whole budget, there's some give and takes that I consider when preparing this budget. A lot of it also is through dialogue and communication with the agencies and with the administration. And thus far, you know, it seems to have held true. Now, there's no reason for me to think otherwise. It hasn't happened in the past, at least from my experience regarding the budget. So there's no reason for me to doubt them at this point.
Well, again, the authority to appropriate, even though, again, it seemed very weird over the last few years because the governor seems to be doing unilateral appropriations and the legislature seems to be wagging the rest of the tail. So to me, I mean, we find out now that there are 100 positions throughout our villages that may or may not be funded dependent upon a transfer authority versus a direct appropriation from the legislature. If the governor's going to move money, she's moving money from other government agencies. So are we padding other government agencies to accommodate transfer?
I would think, Senator, that the governor has different options at this point. I mean, whatever revenue sources or whatever sources she has to cover this, she would probably be in the best position to do that. But, you know, her assurance to me was that she was going to cover it.
I understand, but I don't feel comfortable that the governor could change for all we know. And then those assurances go out the window. A lot of things go out the window when the dynamics and the political power changes. So I wouldn't take that to the bank. I'm just saying normal process of appropriation is we directly appropriate. If we're going to appropriate positions in the government, then the Guam Legislature appropriates it. But what you're telling us now is that we have 100+ community service workers that may or may not get funded this upcoming year.
Well, yeah, there's, aside from the other revenue sources that may be available to her, she's also has the governor's transfer. She can use that as far as where the fund sources are going to be for this transfer. That would be up to the administration to do. As shown in the past, and last year is a good example, they utilize the governor's transfer to cover shortfalls or to cover areas they felt needed additional funds. And I'm going to hold them true that, this is one of those things that, they should at least make this a priority and make sure this is funded.
Well, again, I beg to differ. I think the legislature has a responsibility to address direct appropriation. So right now, we're hearing we have 100-plus community service workers in our villages that may or may not be funded because the legislature is not providing any direct appropriation to fund their positions. That's what I'm hearing. With regards to any other government agency, because we did meet with you last Friday to go over the proposed budget by the committee, are there other entities in the government of Guam that are being cut from this previous year budget of fiscal year 2022 going into fiscal year 23?
Aside from the 11 I just mentioned, there are no other agencies that are receiving they're receiving an appropriation lower than the FY22 level.
Not the public auditor's office?
No.
What about the $33,000 that was proposed to cut at the public auditor's office?
Again, may I make it clear to the panel and to the senators, when we met at OFP, I specifically made it clear that the worksheet and the information I provided you is a working document. It is a document we came at a point in time what we were recommending. Those levels that we passed out on those worksheets are levels at the time we decided that those are the best levels we came up with. But as we went through the meetings and senators had concerns about the way things were being proposed in the budget, they came back to me and gave me their input, their comments regarding the budget. We took those comments into consideration and made the proper adjustment if it was feasible and possible. We did. I believe, Senator, you brought up the subject about the public auditor receiving a $33,000 cut. We went back and looked at it and I says, okay, well, $33,000 is $33,000. But, aside from all, and we're aware of it, there's bills out there that are trying to help the public auditor move along, get additional staff, provide them whatever it is they need to do to get their work done. So we went back and reassessed. I said, well, you know what? If there's movements out there, if there's bills out there that are trying to help to even provide additional funding for the public auditor, I thought it was kind of like ironic that, all those things are happening out there, but yet we are cutting the agencies. So we restored back the $33,000 to the FY22 appropriation level.
And did that apply to other government agencies? Again, we've not spoken since last Friday, so of course I'm going to go on your word as of our last meeting on what we discussed. And you mentioned that it was across the board.
There are some agencies that we adjusted since then, and we will see it as we go through the bill. And but I don't think anything drastic. We may have shifted maybe funding sources, but the bottom line stayed the same. We did not go over the 713 general fund. We just reallocated what we distributed earlier to places that we felt that, after reassessing, after communicating with the various senators, they're giving me their comments and inputs on what they felt was, important. We took it under advisement. And like I said, if it was something that was doable, we went ahead and entertained it. If it wasn't, I contacted every single senator and told them specifically either nay or yay of what they were requesting. And all of them have responded saying, okay.
And is this figure, you're giving us this figure, can you repeat it again? Was it 732?
Which one?
Your figure that you gave, the overall.
The general fund?
Yes, what is, I just want to clarify for ourselves and the public. I just want to make sure, because there's so many different figures being proposed.
It's 713, 713 million.
And this doesn't include any proposed increase of 17 million, does it, or not?
17,
That was a discussion on Friday, was a possibility of raising an additional $17 million to cover shortfalls anticipated in other government agencies. You provided a list of those.
okay. Just to make it clear, the 17 million I'm referring to is our OFB recommended level above the governor's request.
Yes.
So anything above the 1713, I don't recall any, that if there's a $17 million additional request, no, it does not include
It's not
it.
official now? That I just pulled that figure out of the sky? I'm
I
sure
thought I-
didn't
I
make
thought I
up-
missed
I'm
the
sure I didn't make
conversation
up that
yesterday.
figure. I recall that very specifically because we discussed it.
Yeah,
Has it since disappeared?
I don't know, but I don't recall a $17 million request yesterday, but like you said, if it's something that, you want to work with, then fine. But no, the 713 does not include the 17 million.
Can I ask, because again, we're making decisions based on what we look at as a windfall the last couple of years with regards to our revenues. Can you at least give me a breakdown, at least over the last 5 or 6 years, of our annual revenue stream so that we have an idea of what we've had in the last few years and where we are now?
Sure.
Would you have that information available?
I can give you at least, I just have it here, the last 3 years. Here. Yeah. At least the level for FY20, we're talking about the general fund, what we appropriated. We're talking about in FY20, the total, well, actually I go back to 2019.
Okay.
I can give you, that was 631 million.
Okay.
In FY20, that was 645 million. In FY21, it was 630 million. In FY22, with the Amended Budget Act recently, it went up to 679 million. And then, of course, our proposal for FY23 is 713.
And so we're making long-term commitments, at least so far, if the legislature is going to move forward with regards to the pay increases. And what have you calculated for this upcoming fiscal year? What's the total impact to the people of Guam with regards to these raises? How much is it going to collectively cost? What is it adding to the cost of the government?
If we take the FY22 appropriation level, what's authorized, which is the 623 million, and we tack on basically what ORB is recommending in the bill of 713 million, that is a $90 million increase.
Overall, just on the pay increases?
No, that is the increase
Okay,
between
the overall
two
increase of
budgets.
budget.
Yes.
What exactly have we calculated the actual pay increases?
If we're talking
These
only,
arbitrary pay increases that the governor has made on her own.
okay, if we're
How
talking
much are
about
we
the law
talking?
enforcement and we're
Yes.
talking about the teacher's pay, we're looking something around 25, 35, maybe about $40 million.
So we're looking $40 million to infinity that the people of Guam are going to address moving forward. Again, just because of the unilateral, has, I'm sure, nothing to do with the election. We're just, I guess it's a common thing now. Every future governor now can do their own pay raises, and
Well,
the legislature will be there to pick up the bill. I'm assuming that's what they're assuming.
Beginning FY23, considering all these pay raises, it would be a fixed cost moving forward, yes.
And do you anticipate the continued growth of the revenue stream in your projections? I mean, we were aware, 4 or 5 years ago, obviously, we anticipated the military buildup, but even them in their presentation, it's going to go up and it's going to slide down. So obviously, revenues that we're getting as a result, and again, I don't know the specific amounts. I don't know who in the government of Guam's determined exactly what that revenue stream is in and of itself, just based on that coming in, because I don't know if we have a way of verifying how much direct cash is coming into our economy as a result of that.
Well, your answer to your first question, do I expect the revenues to go up? Yes, I pray that it goes up. I mean, I think we all wish it would go up.
Well, to what extent are
Well-
you anticipating the next few years? Because this is not a short-term obligation. This is a long-term obligation moving forward. And I have to tell you, since the last time I was here, the government of Guam, and I was gone for 14 years, has doubled. In 14 years, has doubled its operational cost. So, I mean, it'd be nice if money continues to fall from the sky, but, the odds of that are...
Well, right now, if you look at the CER report, it is tracking almost 100 million above adopted revenues for FY22. We hope that will increase even further next year. We've taken everything into consideration, what we know today, what has been provided us today, and what we see what's happening today into account, and that revenue stream from FY22 is being increased by $90 million. Thus, we're requesting a budget of $713 million for FY23. So we do anticipate, Senator, that the economy will, if nothing, if it remains stable the way it is now, and we're $100 million above FY22, it's a good sign. I just hope it doesn't go down. And if we can maintain this going into 23, I think we can at least sustain the government operation for one more year and not cause a deficit, not cause any shortfalls. So that is our outlook. That is what we anticipate. That's what we hope to happen. And I hope at least at the bare minimum that we do generate at least the $90 million that we're asking for in FY23 and nothing less.
Well, I just have to say for this round, I mean, that's what's concerning. If we're, and again, wonderful that we're getting it this year, maybe next year, but it's the year after and the year after that and the year after that that concerns me. I think is going to concern our community because we've been through this. We did that during the Ada Blas administration, the time when all that activity, economic activity on Guam and growth and military investment. But
Yes.
We saw where that ended up. And I would hate to think our people are being given a story and then the next year or two, they're further burdened with all the additional costs that's being added and expectations that they're going to be carrying this additional cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Your time has expired. Senator Adder, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have a couple of questions just to go off with Senator Brown's comments and statements. Steve, is the all this enhanced revenues, right, that we've been collecting, $90 million plus, that is also from taxes collected from the programs that have been going out, am I correct? Like program Salapi 1, 2, those programs are taxed, right?
Yeah, maybe that question can be answered by revenue tax, but
Sure.
my understanding is that the money does go out, and I'm sure it does circulate in the economy, and when they start to spend it, as far as the tax part, that might be something that, they may have to record that in their income tax as income. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Director Shimizu?
Thank you for that question. To answer with regards to the payments for the EIP 1, 2, 3, then also for the other programs, for example, Azuda Mengafa and the All Rice and Program Slapi, those were not included in people's taxable income. So that would not impact the individual income tax.
Okay, so they're not taxed on those revenues? Oh,
No.
okay, that's good to hear. So the question I have, Director Shimizu, also is on the, the passage of HR 5376 from the Senate, the Inflation Reduction Act. And what would be the impact of these what would be the impact of the new climate change credits that we'll have on income tax revenues for the government of Guam?
And I'm sorry, Senator, I will have to look into that. I know there were other provisions outside of the those specifically related to income taxes, but I understand that there are these other credits, but those I would have to look into.
So you guys haven't been discussing what the impact would be on HR 5376?
No, sir.
None?
Not at this time.
Yeah, it's only because it's concerning as well that with HR 5376, it allows tax credits for residential clean energy costs, including rooftop solars and energy systems, things like that, 30% credit, and this is for the next 10 years. So, I mean, I'm not sure what.
Sure.
how
There
we-
are already certain energy credits that are allowed in our individual income tax returns, for example, for electric vehicles, also for solar as well. And again, I'm not sure how this may expand what's already allowed for in the law, but that's something we could look at further. But again, already there are some credits that are allowable for certain energy related items.
Yeah, so would the passage of 5376 add to those credits that are already allowed? And would it increase the tax credit liability for government of Guam?
If I may make a comment, Senator Ada.
Please.
The credit, 30%, that's predicated on an individual spending $20,000 or $30,000 locally to be able to get the solar improvements, and then only then avail of 30% credit. So you're going to have a significant amount of money spent either for a new vehicle or for retrofitting your rooftop for solar. Those injections and economic stimulus are being offset by the credit. So you have it's like doing the tango. The first step is to be able to spend the money, and only then are you able to take a credit against what you spent. So you're buying a new electric vehicle at $50,000, $60,000 or whatever they cost, then you get a credit after you purchase it. Same thing with the solar. So we're going to see economic activity that will be spurred by the community in order to avail of the credit, but one follows after the other.
Yeah, okay. So then we're also looking at the 15%, what is it, a minimum 15% tax for those that generate, what is it, over $1 billion, right?
Right.
Do you know how much Guam would actually look to benefit from this tax increase?
With regards to that, as I mentioned yesterday, I believe that likely that will have little to no impact on us here locally.
Okay. And then also the bill proposes to raise $124 billion in new taxes from enhanced IRS, enforcement. What are these new enforcement provisions, and is there any federal funding for actually implementing these new enforcement programs? And is DRT going to realize any revenues from this?
As far as I know, and in fact, I would have to go back and look at that. But with regards to our local efforts, of course, we have been working to try to get training and other things for our local agents. What I understand was happening over the last few years with regards to the IRS, and if you'll note that probably maybe your office or some of the other legislative offices have received calls from people who have gotten these notices that they owe taxes to the federal government. Over the period of COVID, what has happened with the IRS is that a lot of of course, people had to work remotely. A lot of the processing centers actually had shut down, and so what was happening because as a result of that. When they started sending out notices, I suppose if it's the reconciliation against, who are Guam taxpayers, et cetera, was not necessarily occurring because there was a lot of backlog. And so that's why we saw a lot of notices. My understanding is that likely the addition of the additional agents is going to be to help to get some work caught up, and as well to make sure as well that as they get caught up, the prior taxes are collected. But I am not exactly familiar. I would have to work probably with my counterpart to determine more, and probably will be able to get back to the body on that specifically. But I don't have specific information. I'm just kind of, again, gathering from our experience over the last few years about what we have seen in terms of what has been coming out of the IRS and how it's been impacting our taxpayers on Guam.
Okay, I see. And outstanding tax obligations, how's collections been going on that on our local end? Has it increased? Have you were able to decrease the tax obligations owed to the government of Guam by enhancing collections?
So over the last several years, and going back even to 2019, I can kind of speak on what we did in 2019 was pre-COVID, we actually had field agents. We increased our field agent visits so that way we had a presence in the community. So taxpayers who had significant outstanding liabilities or liabilities that they were not working actively to remedy with us, we had our agents going out to them to work to collect. And of course, as we hit COVID, we had to decrease or not do that type of thing. But also, you'll notice we have been successful at a few of kind of large cases. We had a large case where we were able to, I believe the judgment was for about $3.5 million. That was a case where we worked with the AG's office. We also had in 2019 referred cases to the AG's office, one of which we just realized, I think this last year, which was the one hotel which had owed taxes as well, and so we were successful in that particular case. So, we have been working on cases even throughout COVID. One of the things that has been important to us, in which we were able to get funded by actually the clearinghouse, the clearinghouse, state clearinghouse was able to get funding for, was training, because really, of course, our team needs to be able to stay on top of the current, what the current practices are. So what we're going to expect to see in the next year is more training for our examiners, and also more training for our revenue officers who are the collection agents, who go out and actively collect. And in addition to that, of course, we're working at this time to hire more people, because we have lost some people through some people who have transferred to other agencies, et cetera. But, of course, we are continuing to work to collect the best we can. Our team has been sending out notices, so we know we have been receiving, calls from taxpayers who have been receiving notices, but that's an ongoing effort that we have going on.
I see. So when you first started, what was the outstanding taxes owed to government of Guam?
And I would have to get back to you on the balance for that. I believe it was over 100 million, but I would have to get back to you on that, Senator Ada.
Okay. And then what is it at now?
I will have to get that.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
So if you can just get back to me, what is it prior and then what is it today?
Yes, will do.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, that's the only questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Eitc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel who's here today. I'm just going to tag off on what Senator Ada was talking about, tax refunds. I'm looking at the report here for the liability of tax refunds that are still waiting for payment at $19.96 million that's left. So the question I have is to DOA with regards to that amount that's still in liability. How much is in the tax refund account to pay for that remaining $20 million? How much is in the account? The balance, I guess, from what we appropriated last year for 2022 tax refunds, how much is left over to cover that $20 million?
I have to answer that question in two ways, and I'm going to ask Director Shimizu to take up the second half of it.
Okay.
But if you recall, last year, the amount that was put aside for tax refunds anticipates the federal subsidy for EITC and CTC. That's sitting in a bank account ready to be spent once that amount is actually made available. So just off the top, there's probably around about 26 million sitting available, but that's not cash. That's the appropriation, and that's the question you were asking, correct?
Right. Well, now the question is how much cash is there?
Well, I see the cash is in that's why I was asking the question. The cash is in different places. There's some sitting in the federal accounts waiting to be moved over when it's paid out.
Right.
And there's cash sitting in the local account, but like 60% of the refund is actually subsidized by the federal government.
Right. So, Mr. Burns, I understand that we are being reimbursed or not, actually fronted for earned income tax credit, and we're also being fronted for the additional tax credit or advance and regular child tax credit receipts. I'm not talking about that. That money is in a lockbox for that. I'm talking about just the other taxes that are due.
Which other taxes?
How much do we have to pay out still in liability of taxes that are remaining, not including EITC and advanced tax?
Well, you started off the question by saying there was 19 million, so
Yeah, there was a liability of 19 million, but how much of that is EITC and advanced tax credit?
if I may, I'm going to ask the Director of Rev and
Okay.
Tax to respond to that.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne.
And of that 19 million or so, Senator Tideway, I don't have the breakdown by what is CTC, EITC, or ACTC. I can tell you how much we have paid out in those amounts, though, for tax years 2020 and 2021. For EITC, for 2020, we paid out about 48.3 million. For the child tax credit, we paid out about 38 million. And for ACTC, or the additional child tax credit, we paid a little bit over 20 million.
20 million.
But I don't have the breakdown of that 19.96 million.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to move on with, this is for BBMR. We know that we're still recovering from the pandemic. You know, both our businesses are recovering as well as our tourist industry is also recovering. And it's been claimed by you that, you know, we anticipate additional revenue coming in or an increase in revenue, even though that we're still recovering mode by military and the military buildup. But it's never been given to us about exactly how much funding are we looking at into our tax revenue that's going to cover that. Is there a number that you're looking at? And if not, then I'll ask OFB as well. What number did you come up with to determine how much additional funding that's going to be? And if you can take out the manpower development, the H2 workers, put that aside. And we're just talking about GRT with these military contracts. What are the number you're looking at for 2023?
Thank you, Senator Tideway. There was an abundance of information disseminated by Joint Region recently that I recall a graph that shows construction activity by segment of the military service. One is color coded, something, 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 but it's extremely robust. I believe it is in the billions of dollars in the next few fiscal years of actual construction that's funded. And if you were to take a look at how that, including revenues that we are booking that is available for you to look at from construction activities, it is very, very, very robust and has at least a 4 to 5 year span attached to it. So this construction, specifically for the military, does have legs. It has longevity. It will continue to assist in our economic foundation moving forward. And I think that it is extremely telling, and it makes us confident about the numbers that were contained in the EBR, also in the substitute bill that we're discussing today, and also by the actions of the legislature with the GPA rebate and the $28 million that we have been able to put aside for the rainy day fund. I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that are we able to sustain this? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. Are we able to capitalize on it? I think this body has capitalized on it by putting $28 million in the rainy day fund.
Okay, Lister, I think we're digressing here. I'm just asking for a number, an amount. Are we anticipating that these contracts that are coming in by the military is going to yield the government of Guam in revenue tax at least 20 million for this year, 10 million, 5 million, a number. This is a number that's been asked for many years. Even the OPA is trying to look at funding, finding ways of capturing this money. You talk about all this military buildup and these contracts. Majority of them are issued out to off-island companies. How are we able to capture that revenue, that tax revenue? They're filing their taxes in the States. So I'm just asking for a simple question. How much funding do you think is going to come in FY23 for taxes that's going to yield from this military buildup, just for 23?
Okay, I could get back to you.
So, but you guys are raising up the revenues based on, I mean, you're the one that talked about military buildup and raising the revenues because it's growing, but yet you guys don't have a number.
We do have a number. Make no mistake about that. You asked me specifically for military.
Right.
I'll get you the number.
OFB, do you have a number?
We have information, Senator, that we used to come out to substantiate the numbers that we were reflecting in our bill. And the numbers we're using goes all the way back to FY 2017. Now, we took basically what the contribution of military buildup contracts, taking the 4% in 2017, because it was 4% at the time. I'll put it back. And then, you know, that amounted to about 26 million in 2018. Which is...
Where did you get this data? You said it's 26 million you got in 2014.
Senator, this is information we gather.
Okay.
Okay, so in our gathering of information, we take all this information and put it together and come up with the best scenario, what we feel is going to happen, taking this information going forward.
Yeah, but I'm just asking you, how did you know, let's say a large contractor comes into Guam from off-island and gets a $100 million contract, but they file all their taxes off-island. So how do we capture it? How does Guam capture any of that business tax on this island? Do you actually have the contracts? Does Reven Tax show that they're receiving taxes from these companies, these off-island companies?
Senator, we get our information from various sources. One of them, we also get it from the AS 400. Whatever we draw from the AS 400 from these categories, we take that and use that information. You're asking us, you're trying to ask me, what are all my sources? I mean, we can sit down another time and I can probably provide you that. But I think it's going to take all day to do that.
We've been asking for so many, you know, every time we're in committee of the whole to find out what these numbers are, and nobody seems, not even the OPA can give you those numbers too.
These are numbers we derived based on information we gathered. It may vary from others. It may vary from how the administration does it, how BBMR does it. But if you're asking me, I'm giving you my information.
Okay, give me for this FY23. What is your numbers for FY23?
For FY 2018, remember there was only, I believe, 6 months left in the fiscal year when the VBT changed from 4 to 5%. That amounts maybe about about 27 million. In FY 2019, that amount about maybe 38 million. In FY20, we're talking about almost 48 million. In FY21, we're looking at maybe 58 million. And what we project in FY23, for 22, because we're still in 22, is about 69 million.
Okay, and this, Steve, is what is anticipated in taxes coming into our government of Guam general fund for all these contracts.
Based on contracts with this, if you look in the system, it divides it by contracts local and contracts U.S. Those are the numbers, when you tally, are the numbers I just gave you. And that is based on the 4 and 5% VBT that is assessed to these companies.
And how much tax revenue is going into our general fund paid at Reven Tax in FY 2020? Your estimated in 2022 is $69 million? That's going into our, into revenue tax to pay for taxes?
That is what we're tracking, Senator, yes.
I definitely want to see where you're getting your numbers from, because this is something that BJ can't even,
Okay, you may refer to the Director's Revenue Tax. Maybe she can provide information on that.
okay. Would BB, well, you know, I'm definitely going to find out where you get these numbers, because I'm not sure, but I'm not going to drag it on. But I will find out if any of these off-island companies that are coming here, doing business on Guam, are paying any taxes on this island. I'm going to find out. Okay. The other question I have for BBMR is, do you have a draft copy of the CRER for July?
Nope.
Senator Titlery, Ms. Daphne Simzo is available to answer the question referring to taxes. I think she'll be the proper person to answer those when you're dealing with businesses, doing business on Guam and avoiding taxes. I think.
Sure.
Ms.
Mr. Chair,
Simms
if
will
I
be
may,
proper.
Mr. Chair, I know we have a second round.
Okay.
I'm going to dedicate that just for that part,
Oh,
because
okay then.
it's a big bulk of our revenues
All
coming
right,
in.
no problem.
And we're anticipating this to sustain us for the next umpteen years, 5 years, on this military buildup we keep talking about. So it's something
No
important, and so I'll bring that up on the next one.
Okay.
So you don't have a copy of the draft, well, several times you provided us early on with the CRER, but you don't have for July. It's unfortunate we're in a budget hearing, so maybe if you can, Lester, asking if you can try to provide us a draft at least, so we can see what's going on for July. The ARP funding, for BBMR again, the ARP funding that the governor still has, about $303 million, is the governor planning on using any of this ARP funding to cover any expenses for FY22 regarding overtime for GFD, GPD?
In 22?
23,
23?
yes.
No.
So no funding for there. She's not going to be transferring any funding for, okay. You know, and for BBMR again as well, we gave a transfer authority for the governor in FY22 for 5%. In FY21, it was about a total of $7 million in transfers. For FY22, you know, so far for FY22, how much transfers has been made so far?
None.
No transfers made. So you haven't even utilized the 5% transfer authority for the governor. That's good to hear. Okay. For DOA, you know, we deliberated on a bill. You talked about prior year obligations, and one of the bills that we had passed last year was Public Law 3654, which pledges $5 million to DOC, and also Public Law 3656, which also pledges $35 million to a new hospital. Do you consider these obligations to the government of Guam?
No, Senator. They're not an obligation until they're actually incurred.
It's a bill that's passed, so you can move forward with this, right? You can go ahead and get the loan and lease back because it's already been giving you the authorization to go ahead and do lease backs.
It's an appropriation, not an obligation.
So it is appropriate. So we have a debt of $40 million right now on the hospital that's supposed to provide in Public Law 3655 and DOC, right? For 3657 for $5 million.
No, respectfully, Senator, it's not an obligation, and therefore not a debt. It's an appropriation until
It's an appropriation.
until an obligation is incurred.
Okay, but it is an appropriation by this body? Is that what you're saying? That's how you're reading it?
It is an appropriation. You have to decide how to handle it.
Okay. It's like, Okay, Section 30 funding, you mentioned you received a letter in July, if I'm not mistaken, and they said that we're anticipating to receive $80.1 million. Is that true?
That was the governor's request, ma'am, 80,197,000.
Oh, that's the governor's request, but the letter said that there was an anticipation of how much from Treasury?
The Department of Interior wrote the governor and asked her to submit a letter no later than August 4th with her request for Section 30. We responded July 29th asking for 80,197,000.
Why is it lower than last year?
Similar to how we look at revenues, we did averaging, but we did speak yesterday about no more war claims. So, and Daphne, Director Shimizu, is not aware of any outstanding reconciliations, which, you know, we never know about reconciliations until they remit to us, respond to us, and if we get the full amount, it would be indicative of nothing taken off for war claims and nothing for reconciliations.
With the military building, Section 30 funding, you know, and more individuals coming to Guam so we can anticipate more. I was just wondering why from 76 in FY22 and now lower in 70 for FY23 is 74.
Senator, we've been consistently asking for 80 million. What you're referencing is what what we have received.
There's a pause. Is there any? You
Yeah,
have any
there
other
was an
questions?
issue with the timing, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
everybody needs to be reminded, when you ask the question, the response time is not counted. When the response is
Right.
done, the clock starts again. If you pause, then you're trying to figure out what your questions would be, you should be ready for it. Okay?
Right, when, actually, Mr. Chair, when you were talking and discussing, the clock was going on.
Okay,
Okay, so that's why
All
I'm
right.
just asking for that 1 minute back.
all right.
One minute, 20 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that as you keep an eye on it too.
Oh,
Thank you.
absolutely. For rev and tax, can you explain the advanced additional tax credit when we receive it? And is it part of the refund provisions for tax refunds on the 62?
Okay, so with regards to the child tax credit, there, in the ARP Act allowed for an advance payment, which is what we saw happen in 2021. We received $93.5 million last year for the child tax credit, both the advance portion and the regular portion. About $56 million was paid out in advance last year as of December 31. And again, you're right, Senator, it's received as in advance. Now, moving forward, those monies are sitting, as Director Byrne mentioned, we have money sitting in a trust account that is specifically for the child tax credit. So now what happens is each time we process check write, what we do is we advise the Department of Administration how much of the check write is for the child tax credit, so that way monies can be moved out of that particular account to pay for those amounts that are being paid out for that refund check write. And going forward, as I understand it, so historically, as you know, the two portions of the child tax credit were the regular child tax credit and the additional child tax credit. There was a portion that was refundable, and there was a portion that was non-refundable. And so now going forward, the entire amount of the child tax credit, both the regular, the refundable and non-refundable portions per the ARP Act of 2021 are now being funded, which is why if you look in the budget document, in the budget bill, I believe it's page 4. That's why there are two amounts now, the 36.2 million. If you look at the FY2023 OFB level column on page 4 of the presentation that was provided by OFB, the 36.2 million and the 24 million are representative of the total amount of the child tax credit that's now going to be paid to the territory, paid to Guam for the child tax credit. So those are actually reflected, yes, in the calculation for the provision. And just to share with the body, historically, as you know, the base amount of the total tax refunds that was used for budgeting was the 145 million, less the 20 million, which is equivalent to the additional tax credit, which is showing as 24.1 million on that column. That was the FY2023 OFB level. So the portion that is new that we haven't seen be funded by the federal government is the 36.2 million. So to answer your question, Senator Tadegui, yes, the child tax credit amounts that are going to be funded by the federal government are included in the budget bill.
Okay. The 24,122,709, which is funded by the federal government, but it's a reimbursement. It's not an advancement. Is that correct?
So prior to the ARP Act, we were getting reimbursed on a quarterly basis for the additional child tax credit. But after the ARP Act was passed, what had happened was the entire amount of that child tax credit, to include the additional, was funded in advance. And we have actually asked the federal government, because the current agreement that we have with the federal government really just covered fiscal year 2021. So we're in discussions with the IRS, we're in early discussions with them about, moving forward, what will happen and how these will be funded. We've requested for the monies to be provided to us in advance, and it appears that that is likely that will happen, but we don't have the final plan, and so we can't advise. But at this point, again, we've asked for it, and it appears that it's very likely that we're going to see it as an advance now. So what will happen is as we need payments, or as we calculate that there is a need to make out payments, we'll request for the funding. They will fund it, and generally the Treasury has been pretty good at turning around the requests for funding very quickly so that we can get those out, and there's not a delay in the payments to our people for refunds.
Thank you, Daphne, for that. I always thought that this was a reimbursement, but now it is a advance. The other question I have with regards, there was something you mentioned, a rebate recover credits. Can you kind of explain that?
Sure. So the rebate recovery credits, we have 3. These are, if you recall, we had EIP 1, EIP 2, and EIP 3. EIP 1 and 2, so for each of the stimulus payments that were received from the federal government, for those people who were either not eligible at the time that we had processed the EIP, or that were eligible but did not qualify for the entire amount, they were able to claim on their either 2020 or 2021 return. 2020 was for EIP 1 and 2. 2021 tax year was for EIP 3. So if they didn't receive them as an advance, either because they were not eligible, they didn't file a tax return, etc., they were able to claim the difference, which is called a rebate recovery credit, when it's paid out on their tax return. And so those are also funded by the federal government. They're a one-off, though. They're an anomaly. They're not going to be future. Again, those were part of what we saw with COVID. They're related to the stimulus payments. So those are not things that we will be seeing moving forward.
Regarding, this is for OFB, regarding Public Law 106, when we appropriated $15 million to the rainy day account, and there was an additional, I believe there was 3, where's my numbers here? Yes, 26 to GPA, 26 plus, pharmaceutical at 3,119, rainy day at 15. These were all appropriated. Total amount is 44,573. However, you increased the revenues in 106 to 58,144,23. The extra rainy day, so Then when you looked at the bill, they incorporated 13,570,574, which then gives you the total amount of increased revenue at 58 million. So can you explain, because there is no appropriation, no obligation for that 13,574. Can you explain what happened there? Because they're claiming, BBMR is claiming they put the 13 in the rainy day fund.
Okay, after the question is answered, that way end your time, Senator Tyree. Mr. Guerrero?
Senator, if I recall, the whole issue of the rainy day fund came up when you came up to Office of Finance and asked how we can set aside $15 million in the rainy day fund. And we gave you basically our position on how to do this. And if your intent was to restore the 2% rainy day fund that was suspended in the FY22 budget, to restore that back into the rainy day fund, that was under our understanding. I also said that if you weren't inclined to the 13 million, I think it's 13,200,000, which is the 2% of the rainy day fund based on FY22 appropriation, that you would only take the difference between that amount and the 15 million that you were asking for, which was, I believe, about 1.4 million. We gave you a spreadsheet on how to do that. We provided you basically the numbers. We weren't purviewed to the language of the final bill when it was drafted.
It was drafted by your office.
No, ma'am, Senator, the language of the bill was not drafted by OFB. We provided you the worksheet, the spreadsheet, the numbers.
Mr. Chair, can you confirm that, because it was your office that created the amendment?
We created the bill for the power, yes, but the insertion of the rainy day fund, I believe, came from you. So in the dialogue that we had ever since then, okay, the dialogue that we had ever since then was that our interpretation or our understanding was to restore the 2% rainy day fund that was suspended in the law. But when talking to you, you were insistent that you wanted 15 million. So I proposed to you, I told you personally, if the difference was, I believe 1.4 is all we had to appropriate to bring it up to the 15 million and not the 13 million that we suspended. After that, nothing was said to OFB. But you asked for the numbers. We provided you a spreadsheet on the numbers and how to do this. We submitted the numbers to, I believe, you the night the bill was being introduced. We were not purview to the language of the bill. So if you look at the way the bill finally ended up, is that we appropriated the 15 million. We appropriated the 36.130, I believe, for GPA, whatever the amount is, and the 13 million that was in the rainy day fund, which we thought you wanted to put aside. But in the same bill that was passed, it kept the suspension of the rainy day fund amount. So that's how we came up with the 54 million. It was only supposed to be the appropriation for the GPA credit, and it was only supposed to be the 15 million. But since the language, the bill did not, the bill kept the suspension of the rainy day fund, that's why the 13 million was added to the bill.
Mr. Chair, if I may, please, because he's making accusations that I'm the one that created the bill, and you and I both worked on this amendment, Mr. Chair. And your office, as well as OFB, worked together to try and get 15 million, the intent of the legislation, and BBMR, I gave you a copy of the bill. Because in the bill, if you look at page 9, it says clearly.
Senator Tyree.
I know, but this accusation, we've got 13 million floating.
Senator Tyree, your time is up. We will make clarification, we'll get some information, and when we come back,
Right.
then we'll present that.
Okay, but Mr. Chair, can you concur that it was your office that created the amendment?
We were helping develop the amendment, that's correct.
Okay,
All right?
thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It is 11:31 at this time. We'll recess until 2 o'clock. Thank you.